Good morning. I'm Bill Brady, the current president of the Delaware State Bar Association. Standing with me here today are a number of other men and women who are members of the Bar Association, including former Chief Justices and Associate Justices of the Delaware Supreme Court, former judges from the Court of Chancery, Superior Court, and Family Court, past presidents of the Delaware State Bar Association, and past and present chairs of several sections within our bar. We stand united in our support of the Delaware court system and its judges, and in particular, the Court of Chancery and our Chancellor, Andre Bouchard. As you know, our courts and the Chancellor have been under attack from a group calling itself Citizens for a Pro-Business Delaware. That group has been running a series of print, television, and online ads which have repeatedly called the Court of Chancery corrupt and singled out Chancellor Bouchard for particularly harsh criticism simply because a litigant in the Transperfect case decided by the court, Philip Shaw, was unhappy with the outcome. We've been accused of circling the wagons in defense of the court. However, our goal is to provide a little information about the claims made by the citizens group and about the group itself so that the public is fully informed and will see the real motivation behind this campaign. The Transperfect decision to which Mr. Shaw continues to object was originally decided by Chancellor Bouchard in August 2015. That decision contains a short history of the Transperfect company, and I believe a brief summary is helpful to put the current issues in context. Transperfect was founded by two parties then in business school together, Mr. Shaw and Elizabeth Elting. They served as co-CEOs of the company and at one time were engaged to one another. However, as their business grew enormously, they became extremely hostile to one another to the point where both routine and critical business decisions became hopelessly deadlocked because each had a 50% ownership interest in the company. Mr. Shaw actually had a 49% interest and his mother 1%, but she was firmly aligned with her son and he simply voted her interest. Eventually, Ms. Elting petitioned our Court of Chancery seeking the appointment of a custodian to sell the company for the benefit of the stockholders pursuant to Delaware law. That was eventually ordered by Chancellor Bouchard following trial. And in particular, the Chancellor ordered that the company be sold with a view towards maintaining the business as a going concern. Mr. Shaw appealed the Chancellor's ruling to the Delaware Supreme Court, which affirmed the decision in February 2017, and noted that the Chancellor's remedy to preserve the company as a whole, and I quote, was well designed to protect the other constituencies of the company, notably its employees, by positioning the company to succeed and thus secure the jobs of its workforce. In a separate ruling, Chancellor Bouchard ruled that Mr. Shaw had intentionally destroyed evidence and repeatedly lied under oath, and as a result, awarded Ms. Elting over $7 million in attorney's fees and expenses. The Supreme Court also affirmed that decision to sanction Mr. Shaw, noting it was, and I quote again, based on a clear record of his egregious misconduct and repeated falsehoods during the litigation. The postscript of those decisions is that the custodian appointed by the Chancellor solicited bids and eventually oversaw a transaction where Mr. Shaw bought out Ms. Elting's interest in the company. I recommend that you read the various Transperfect decisions, and copies are available at the back of the room. They are lengthy, but shed a great deal of light on the current actions and motives of the citizens group. In particular, they detail Mr. Shaw's repeated use of mutual hostage and bullying tactics in order to get his way, and also having a plan to, quote, create constant pain for Ms. Elting until she acquiesced to his business demands. And, as I noted earlier, Mr. Shaw's destruction of evidence and lying under oath, resulting in the award of attorney's fees. Those cases speak for themselves, and again, I highly suggest that anyone interested read them through. Citizens for a Pro-Business Delaware labels itself a grassroots organization, but nothing could be further from the truth. The group appears to be funded by Mr. Shaw and his mother Shirley Shaw, and is spending, according to its own press releases, between $500,000 and $1 million in print, online, and television advertisements. Mr. Shaw himself is, from all accounts, the primary shareholder of Transperfect, a company that is worth an amount approaching $1 billion. It's also represented by a professional public relations company which has carefully orchestrated its public statements and activities thus far. I ask you, is that a grassroots organization? As noted, the Citizens Group is largely made up of current Transperfect employees, current and former Transperfect employees. While they claim they can count among them a number of Delaware residents, I would submit to you that it's highly unlikely that any Delaware members of the Citizens Group have been accurately informed about the reasons behind the campaign, and if they were, equally unlikely whether they would have even supported it in the first instance. We would hope and expect that once they become aware of the true facts of the matter, they will disassociate themselves from the Citizens Group and see it for the fraud that it is. In addition, although the group claims to be for a pro-business Delaware, where are the Delaware businesses that should be lining up to support it? Where are the business advocacy organizations, the chambers of commerce, and so on? The answer is simple. Business owners and organizations recognize that we have the best business court in the United States in our Court of Chancery. They recognize that the Citizens Group does not speak the truth about our courts or the Chancellor or the underlying decision to which Mr. Shaw still complains. They have categorically rejected the group and its personal vendetta against the Chancellor. Likewise, the group's recent call for diversity on the court is disingenuous and a last-gasp effort to legitimize its agenda and methods. It would be easy to simply label Mr. Shaw as a sore loser. However, in the end, he didn't lose his company, he wound up owning it. Despite that, and unlike most people, he couldn't let it end at that. And again, unlike most people, he has an almost unlimited amount of resources at his disposal, and he's used that to fund a false and misleading smear campaign against the court and Chancellor. Recently, he's gone even further to include the Chancellor's family in his advertisements and commercials. As I mentioned in my recent message to the members of the Bar Association, we simply cannot stand for that. In conclusion, I ask anyone who wants to know the true facts of this matter to simply read the record so that they can see through the charade that is the Citizens Group. Thank you. I'm happy to entertain any questions to the extent that I can answer them. So, yes.
It's been reported that this case cost $250 million. Was that Mr. Shaw's? Was that the money he spent, or is it? How did it get to that point? Astronomical amount.
I don't know. I have no personal involvement with that matter. I believe that number has been thrown about a bit in various, I'll call them press releases from the Citizens Group. I don't know whether that's the total amount of fees or the amount that was spent by Mr. Shaw and his mother. But quite frankly, the reason it got to that was due to the extraordinary lengths that Mr. Shaw took, at least this is my understanding, to fight the case in the Court of Chancery. And as noted, the Chancellor awarded a significant amount of attorney's fees to Ms. Elting because of Mr. Shaw's actions during the litigation.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
The Transperfect case is completely finished. There's no other avenues at this point for them to...
I believe there are still some things going on. I don't know that for certain. As I said, I have no personal involvement with that case. I think for all intents and purposes, certainly the main claims that were brought by the parties. Ms. Elting sought the sale of the company. That has been accomplished. There were some other incidental matters, other decisions, as I mentioned, by the court involving sanctions against Mr. Shaw. It may well be that there's still some mopping up to do, but for all intents and purposes, to my understanding, the litigation is essentially concluded.
How did we get from what is basically a domestic dispute within a company to here?
Well, that's an interesting question. Again, we had a company that essentially had two CEOs with an equal ownership interest. And amazingly enough, as the company grew exponentially over the years, they had no buy-sell agreement whereby if one party wished to buy out the interest of the other, they could do so in some formulatic method. Those are things that are routinely built into company agreements for small companies, mom-and-pop companies, partnerships here in Delaware. It's unfortunate that the parties in this particular instance that had a company worth in the hundreds of millions of dollars never saw through to have that completed. And as a result, Ms. Elting apparently had no other recourse but to petition the court to request a sale.
Is the attack on Chancellor Bouchard at this point specifically due to the fact of personal, it's strictly retribution at this point? There's no basis in fact or law?
We believe that it is. Again, if you read the record, if you read the decisions, the Delaware Supreme Court affirmed Chancellor Bouchard's ruling essentially start to finish. And again, as I mentioned in my prepared remarks, noted that his remedy of selling the business as an ongoing concern specifically protected the employees. That's one of the main complaints that they made during the course of the litigation several years ago, that if the company were sold, hundreds of employees or more would be out of jobs. The Supreme Court found that that was the appropriate remedy in this instance. Again, we believe that all that's left is Mr. Shaw's dissatisfaction with the Chancellor's decision and with the Chancellor himself. And because he's in a position to be able to do so, he has launched this campaign, again, approaching $1 million, if not more at this point.
One last question. Why should an average Delawarean care about this? Because an average Delawarean is going to look at this and say, okay, this is too much to read. $1 billion, $1 million being, it's money, it's going to be funny money to a lot of Delawareans. Why should they care about this?
Well, you just raised a good point, and I'd noted it before as well. That's a lot to read to somebody to go through. The Chancellor's decision alone, I think even with double column format, is about 50 pages. The Supreme Court decision isn't quite as long, but there's some accompanying decisions as well. Unfortunately, for better or worse, we live in an age of sound bites. You only have to look at the political climate to realize that. And when Delaware residents hear sound bites, snippets, calling our court corrupt, criticizing the Chancellor, criticizing him personally, stating things which, again, have no bearing in, certainly do not reflect the true facts of the matter or Delaware law, it's very easy for them to instantly form an opinion that there must be something wrong here. We have to get involved. We have to do something. And that's probably how they've convinced whatever number of Delawareans have joined this group that, again, because they're not telling them the truth. They're not telling them the whole story. That's one of the reasons why we're here today. We're trying to set the record straight so that people will have confidence in our court. This is not my opinion. This isn't the opinion of the men and women behind me. Delaware has been recognized again, as of 2 weeks ago, as the best courts in our country, hands down. There's a reason for that, and Delawareans should have the utmost confidence in our courts, especially with this. The Chancellor got this decision right. If there's any fault in the matter, or if there's anything that in hindsight Mr. Shaw should look at, he should have had a buy-sell agreement years ago that would have avoided all this. And he should not have, if anything, he's the one who circled the wagons during the course of the litigation and caused those costs to skyrocket to probably unprecedented levels.
Forgetting for
Yes.
a second about the motivation for all this. I'm assuming you have access to a lawyer or two. Do you feel that the ad violates freedom of speech, violates anything that would cause anybody, whether it's the court system, or whether it's the association, whether it's Judge Bouchard, the ability to litigate this act?
Well, I don't understand the end of that when you say.
In other words,
I got the first part, I
right,
believe,
you're,
but.
you're doing a press conference for 3 people that have shown up. You've got people outside passing out their statements. I'm wondering if you have any ability outside of making a statement with a bunch of people in the room that would stop them from doing this ad, or do you feel that they have the right to publish the ad?
Well, I'm not a First Amendment lawyer. I'm not going to, and I've not spoken to anybody about the merits of any, I'll say, freedom of speech, claim that they may assert. I mean, certainly, pardon me?
Why not?
Well, I don't think it's appropriate at this point. I'd rather look at the content of their message and refute what they're saying in there. It's simply not true. It's not accurate. And then to go beyond that, as the recent ads have done, to personally attack the Chancellor is uncalled for.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm asking, number one, you would think that maybe you guys would have spoken to a First Amendment lawyer. But number two, has the Bar Association considered taking out counter ads disputing this, or asking the heads of the chambers or whoever to step up and say, no, we don't agree with this?
Well, I can't really comment on other actions that we're doing at this time. But let's just assume for the moment that what the citizens group is doing is protected by the First Amendment. The First Amendment certainly is a little bit of a dual-edged sword. It allows freedom of speech, it allows individuals, it allows groups to express opinions about certain things. The other side to that is it doesn't mean that what they're saying is true or completely true, and that's what we've got here. We have a series of misleading at best and outright false statements at worst. As to what we as a bar association may be doing beyond that, I would imagine that this is going to prompt a response from the citizens group, and we may have to look into doing something further down the road. But as I said, beyond that, I can't really comment on, the nature, whether there would be print ads or other things.
Can you comment on whether you've reached out to the Delaware State Chamber, to other business chambers, to stand up and speak on behalf of the chancellor or the organization?
That's not something I'm at liberty to discuss right now anyway. So I would tell you that some of those questions are going to be answered in the near future.
Have you spoken to Judge Bouchard?
Pardon me?
Have you spoken to Judge Bouchard? How's he feeling about this?
I don't know the chancellor personally. I've met him once or twice. I've not spoken to him and asked him how he's feeling to answer your question.
Anybody else?
I don't-
Somebody there knows Judge Bouchard.
Well,
You know his number.
well, and I think, as you know, the chancellor is prohibited from commenting on litigation. So, and that's quite frankly one of the reasons why we as a bar association had to stand up. We simply could not stand for the continued personal attacks on him or the courts. Okay. I'm happy to try to entertain any other questions. If not, I thank you all for coming today. And again, I would certainly urge you to take copies of the various decisions at the back, read through them, and have a much better understanding of the true facts of this matter.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill.